Where on earth is Michelle Obama?
So we are going to go undercover.
The Obamas are yesterday's news. No one cares about them anymore. They did everything in their power to defeat Trump both times, and they lost.
When Megyn Kelly speaks her mind, the world listens.
Michelle Obama's going to be my focus. We'll get to Obama.
But no one was prepared for what happened when she reacted to Michelle Obama live on air. In a moment that left her audience stunned, Kelly didn't hold back, delivering an unscripted, jaw-dropping response that instantly sent shockwaves through the media. So, what exactly did Megyn Kelly say about Michelle Obama that left everyone speechless? And how did Michelle Obama's words spark such a reaction? Join us as we unravel Megyn Kelly's shocking response to Michelle Obama. In August 2024, Chicago was filled with political energy as the Democratic National Convention, DNC, took center stage. But this year, something felt different. The mood wasn't just intense, it was uneasy. The stakes were higher than ever, and beneath the smooth speeches and carefully planned messaging, an unavoidable truth was lurking. The Democratic Party was in trouble.
Michelle Obama is asking you, no, I'm telling y'all to do something.
Then Michelle Obama stepped onto the stage. The crowd cheered, the cameras zoomed in, and the media got ready for what was sure to be a powerful moment. The DNC was always going to be a major turning point for the Democratic Party. The reason was that Joe Biden was no longer in the race. He hadn't finished his term. He hadn't retired. He had stepped down. For months, Biden's approval ratings had dropped. His struggles during the campaign were becoming harder to ignore. And while the official explanation made it seem like he left for the good of the country, everyone knew the truth. Biden didn't leave on his own. He was forced out. Party leaders had come to a harsh realization. If Biden ran again, he would lose. But that left the Democrats with a big problem. With Biden out, Kamala Harris was now the nominee. And there was just one issue. Almost no one really wanted her. For 4 years, Harris had served as Biden's vice president, yet her approval ratings had stayed at record lows.
She has an enormous strength. I wanted someone who was strong and who was ready to be president on day one. And she's ready.
Even among Democratic voters, excitement for her campaign was weak at best. The party needed a new leader, someone who could change the story, inspire supporters, and cover up the deep divisions within the party.
President Biden and I are working to end this war.
So, they turned to the most influential couple in modern Democratic politics, Barack and Michelle Obama. Make no mistake, the Obamas are still the biggest names in the Democratic Party. Their influence hasn't faded. Their network of donors, advisors, and media connections is still strong. And when the party is in trouble, they are the ones called in to fix things. Barack Obama's presence was felt all over the DNC, even though he wasn't the one giving the keynote speech. Behind the scenes, his influence was everywhere.
He thought trying to actually solve the problem would hurt his campaign.
Reports suggest that he played a direct role in convincing Biden to step down. His connections kept the party in line with his vision, and his support still carried more weight than any other living Democrats. But this time, it wasn't Barack who took center stage. It was Michelle. Michelle Obama was introduced as a symbol of hope, a calming voice in uncertain times.
Welcome, America's 44th president and the love of my life, Barack Obama.
Her speech was classic Michelle, smooth, emotional, and carefully written to connect with everyday Americans. She talked about the country's struggles, about the hopelessness people were feeling, about the need for leadership that could bring people together, not drive them apart. The audience loved it. The media praised it. Social media was flooded with admiration. For the past 4 years, the Democratic Party has controlled the White House.
We have the power to turn our country away from the fear, division, and smallness of the past.
During Biden's first 2 years, they controlled Congress. They hold power in many of the country's biggest cities and most important institutions. So if the country is struggling, if people feel hopeless, and if leadership is failing, how can the same party that has been in charge now claim to be the solution? Let's take a closer look.
How can we be the greatest nation in the world without the best education system in the world?
Megyn Kelly's criticism and deception of hope. During her speech at the Democratic National Convention, Michelle Obama passionately declared that hope is making a comeback. The crowd erupted in applause, and political commentators showered her with praise. But Megyn Kelly wasn't convinced. She saw right through the polished words and asked a question no one in the mainstream media dared to touch. Michelle Obama painted a picture of a country struggling, divided, uncertain, and in desperate need of a new direction. But there was one glaring problem. Her own party had been in charge for the past 4 years. She wasn't talking about undoing the damage of the Trump administration. She was describing the state of America under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And yet, not a single major news outlet questioned the contradiction. Megyn Kelly wasted no time in pointing this out. She called out the underlying message that no one seemed to acknowledge. Michelle Obama's speech wasn't just an uplifting call for unity.
Going small is petty, it's unhealthy, and quite frankly, it's unpresidential.
It was an unintentional critique of the Biden administration itself. You can't tell Americans they're living in dark times while also asking them to re-elect the very people responsible for those conditions. That's like trying to sell a car by first explaining how unreliable and broken it is.
I gave my best to you.
For years, the Democratic Party insisted that Biden was a stabilizing force, that he had brought the country back on track after Trump. But now, at the most important political event of their campaign, one of their most respected figures stood on stage and admitted that America was still struggling, still divided, and still without real unity. This is where things get really interesting, because Michelle Obama wasn't just speaking to voters. She was signaling something much bigger to the Democratic establishment itself. For months, there had been whispers that powerful Democratic insiders, perhaps even Barack Obama himself, were losing faith in Biden's ability to win a second term.
I had the honor of accepting this party's nomination for president.
Rumors swirled that high-profile donors were looking for an exit strategy, that behind closed doors, party leaders were discussing what a post-Biden future might look like. Now, with Michelle Obama essentially confirming that America was in crisis, those whispers were no longer just speculation. They were becoming reality. Her speech didn't sound like someone defending the Biden-Harris administration. It didn't even sound like a rallying cry for their re-election. It sounded like a warning, an attempt to subtly distance herself and the Obamas from an administration that was becoming increasingly unpopular. And the timing couldn't have been more revealing. If the Democratic Party had full confidence in Biden, Michelle Obama's speech would have been very different. She would have spoken about the progress made, the strength of Biden's leadership, and why Kamala Harris was the right person to carry that legacy forward. But she didn't do that. Instead, she talked about lost hope, about a nation at a crossroads, about the struggles Americans still faced. These weren't the words of someone standing firmly behind an administration.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
They were the words of someone carefully stepping away. Megyn Kelly saw this contradiction for what it was. While mainstream media focused on Michelle Obama's powerful delivery and emotional appeal,
Michelle Obama's going to be my focus. We'll get to Obama, Barack Obama too, but let's just start with Michelle. She was the star.
Kelly zeroed in on what wasn't being said. There was no passionate defense of Biden's presidency.
Not to mention, later again, when his vice president Joe Biden became the top dog.
No strong endorsement of Kamala Harris. No compelling argument for why the same leaders should be trusted for another 4 years. The Democrats don't want voters to ask that question because it leads to only two possible conclusions. Either the Biden administration has failed, or the party is deliberately stoking fear to manipulate the electorate. And if it's the latter, then Michelle Obama's speech wasn't just a rallying cry. It was one of the most calculated political moves in years, a move designed to shift the narrative, reposition the Obamas, and prepare for the possibility of new leadership. Was Michelle Obama's speech an honest reflection of her party's struggles? Or was it a carefully crafted attempt to distance herself from an unpopular administration? And more importantly, if even Michelle Obama won't fully stand behind Biden, why should the American people? Let's explore further. Obama's wealth and hypocrisy. Michelle Obama took the stage, standing before millions, speaking with power and confidence. Her words seemed inspiring. At first, she talked about the struggles of everyday Americans, the importance of fairness, and how her mother had always taught her that people should only take what they need. It was a message that sounded noble, even admirable. But there was one major problem, something the media conveniently chose to ignore. During her speech, Michelle Obama urged people to come together, reminding them that the race was close. But when it comes to wealth, the Obamas haven't just taken what they need, they have built an enormous financial empire. Their net worth is estimated to be at least $70 million, possibly closer to $100 million. They don't own just one or two expensive homes. They own 4 multi-million-dollar properties, including a luxurious beachfront mansion worth $2 million on Martha's Vineyard. They live a life of luxury and influence that most Americans can only dream of. The Obamas became famous for fighting for the working class, calling for wealth redistribution, and pushing for higher taxes on the rich.
What you see on TV about the White House, the state floor, that's not the private residence.
Yet, after leaving the White House, they turned their name into a money-making machine. Barack and Michelle Obama signed a book deal worth $65 million. They also secured a contract with Netflix that brought them another estimated $50 million. Michelle Obama alone earns as much as $700,000 for a single speech. And that's just the beginning. Their real estate empire is just as extravagant. Along with their $20 million estate in Martha's Vineyard, they own an $8 million mansion in Washington, D.C., an $8.7 million beachfront home in Hawaii, and an $11.65 million house in Chicago. These aren't modest homes. These are massive estates with private beaches, guest houses, and luxurious amenities, far beyond what anyone could call a necessity. Democrats often push for wealth redistribution, but when it comes to their own fortunes, the rules seem to change. The Obamas frequently speak about income inequality, yet they continue to grow their wealth at an astonishing rate. They call for the rich to pay more taxes, yet they have structured their business deals in ways that minimize their own tax payments. And it doesn't stop there. Michelle Obama has also been vocal about supporting open borders.
We're here because, once again, a lot of people didn't vote.
And encouraging the acceptance of more migrants into the United States. She has criticized conservatives for opposing mass immigration, calling them heartless.
There are 2 more floors that are the residence, and those floors are private to the families who live there.
The Obamas own more homes than they can possibly use. They have millions in cash, and they have enough power and influence to make a real difference in the lives of struggling families. Yet, instead of leading by example, they continue to accumulate wealth while telling everyday Americans that they need to sacrifice for the greater good. And this pattern isn't unique to the Obamas. Many wealthy liberal politicians do the same thing. Look at Bernie Sanders, a self-proclaimed socialist who owns 3 homes, including a lakefront vacation house worth over $500,000. Look at Elizabeth Warren, who speaks out against Wall Street while making millions from book deals and speaking engagements. Look at Nancy Pelosi, whose net worth is estimated at more than $120 million, largely due to her husband's suspiciously well-timed stock trades that align with government policies. These same politicians constantly tell the public that the rich should give back, yet they keep getting richer themselves. And when a conservative businessman like Donald Trump is wealthy, the media rushes to call it greed and corruption. But when the Obamas, the Pelosis, or the Sanders of the world do the same thing, there is silence. So let's be clear about what's really happening here. Michelle Obama is not struggling. She is not a champion of the working class. She is a multimillionaire who enjoys a life of luxury.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama, she found herself as one of the most visible women in the world,
while telling ordinary Americans that they need to give more to support government programs. Her words are empty because they are not backed by action. If she truly believed that people should not take more than they need, she would start by making changes to her own lifestyle. But she hasn't, and she won't. And that should tell you everything you need to know. Because at the end of the day, this is not about helping working Americans. It is not about fairness. It is about control. The people who talk the most about redistribution are usually the ones who have the most to lose. They don't actually want to share their wealth. They want to secure their power. They want the average person to have less while they continue to accumulate more. They want a system where they decide who has too much, where they control the narrative, where they stay on top while telling everyone else to make sacrifices. And Michelle Obama's speech, that was just another carefully crafted performance, was meant to keep people distracted from the truth about who she really is. If Michelle Obama truly wanted to help struggling migrants, why hasn't she opened even one of her 4 luxury homes to shelter them? Let's dive deeper. The strategic political maneuver. Michelle Obama's speech at the Democratic National Convention was striking not only for what she said, but also for what she left unsaid. She had the stage, the spotlight, and a captivated audience hanging on to her every word. This was the perfect opportunity for her to fully endorse Joe Biden, defend his leadership, and convince voters that his presidency had been a success. But instead of doing that, she spoke of uncertainty, disappointment, and a fading sense of hope. That's not the kind of speech you'd expect from someone standing firmly behind an administration they believe in.
For the first time in a long time, because for 8 years prior to that,
For months, speculation had been growing that Democratic Party insiders, including major donors and strategists, were losing faith in Biden's ability to win. His approval ratings had plummeted. His public appearances were becoming more difficult to watch, and even his strongest media allies struggled to portray his leadership as anything other than a liability. Yet for the longest time, Democratic leaders insisted he was the best choice. They shut down primary challengers and dismissed any talk of him stepping aside. Then suddenly, he was gone, and the same people who had worked tirelessly to keep him in power were now acting as if this had always been the plan. That's why Michelle Obama's speech is so significant. It wasn't just another political address. It was a carefully crafted message signaling a shift within the Democratic Party. She didn't focus on defending Biden's record. Instead, she was preparing voters for a post-Biden future. Even after leaving the White House, Barack Obama has remained one of the most powerful figures in the Democratic Party. His endorsement was crucial to Biden's victory in 2020, and behind the scenes, he has maintained strong ties with top Democratic donors, party insiders, and political strategists. Over the past year, whispers have grown louder that Obama played a key role in convincing Biden to step aside. Some reports suggest that he, along with influential Democratic donors, recognized that Biden had little chance of defeating Trump. If they wanted to keep control of the White House, they needed a new plan. At first glance, this decision seems puzzling. Harris has been one of the most unpopular vice presidents in recent history. Her approval ratings have remained low, and even among Democratic voters, enthusiasm for her candidacy has been lukewarm. If the Democratic establishment, including the Obamas, was behind Biden's departure, their strategy likely wasn't just about the short term. They were thinking about the long-term future of the party.
And then people vote. And then if we lose?
And that's where Michelle Obama's speech becomes even more revealing. She wasn't there to boost Biden. She wasn't even there to strongly promote Harris. She was there to present the Obamas as the guiding force of the Democratic Party's future. Look closely at her messaging. She didn't focus on policies or Biden's achievements. Instead, she spoke about the need for hope, fresh leadership, and someone who could guide the country through its challenges. That wasn't an endorsement of the current administration. It was a calculated step back from it. And the timing is no coincidence. Just months before the Democratic National Convention, speculation began swirling about Michelle Obama as a potential future presidential candidate. Some believed she could replace Biden in 2024 if his campaign collapsed. Others thought she was being positioned for a 2028 run. Of course, Michelle Obama has publicly denied any interest in running for office, but so did her husband before 2008. Barack Obama once dismissed the idea of running for president as ridiculous. 2 years later, he was in the White House. This is why commentators like Megyn Kelly were quick to call out Michelle Obama's speech for what it really was. Not just a campaign speech, but a political maneuver. And here's the most fascinating part. If the Obamas are planning a long-term return to power, they wouldn't do it suddenly or make it obvious. They would do it in steps. That moment might not be in 2024. It could be 2028. But make no mistake, The pieces are already being put into place. Was Michelle Obama's speech really about uniting the party? Or was it about laying the groundwork for something much bigger? And if the Obamas are still pulling the strings behind the scenes, who is really in charge of the Democratic Party? Let's find out. Impact of the Obamas on the 2024 election process. The Democratic National Convention wasn't just about supporting Kamala Harris, it was something much bigger. It was a moment that cemented the Obamas' lasting influence over the Democratic Party. Everything about the event, the speeches, the messages, the carefully chosen imagery, pointed to one undeniable truth. Barack and Michelle Obama are still the most powerful figures in the party, and they intend to keep it that way. The truth is, Barack Obama never really left politics.
That is what this campaign is all about, and that is why I'm running for a second term.
While he no longer holds office, he has remained deeply involved in shaping the party's direction from behind the scenes. His endorsements carry more weight than any other Democrats. His donor network is one of the most powerful in the country, and his influence over media, policy groups, and grassroots organizations has never faded. Now, with Joe Biden stepping aside, that influence is becoming more visible than ever. Michelle Obama's speech at the convention wasn't just about supporting Kamala Harris. It was a message to the Democratic establishment that the Obamas are still the glue holding everything together. And it served two key purposes. First, to separate the Obamas from the struggles of Biden's presidency, and second, to position themselves as the stabilizing force that will lead the party into the future. Now, here's where things get even more intriguing. For years, Michelle Obama has insisted that she has no interest in running for office. She has repeatedly dismissed any speculation about a political career. But remember, Barack Obama once said the same thing. Before 2008, he downplayed talk of running for president. As a junior senator, he seemed to be focused on building his career, rather than making a White House bid. Yet, just 2 years later, he launched his campaign. Michelle Obama's presence at the convention suggests otherwise, that she was out of the picture. She didn't have to be there. She could have supported Kamala Harris from behind the scenes. But instead, she took center stage and delivered one of the most high-profile speeches of the entire event. In doing so, she placed herself right in the middle of the Democratic Party's transition away from Biden. And that brings us to the 2024 election strategy. Because if Michelle Obama were even considering a future presidential run,
That is respected and recognized around the world as distinctive and new.
this is exactly how she would start preparing for it. First, she distances herself from the failures of the Biden administration. She acknowledges the country's struggles but avoids directly blaming the Democratic Party. Instead, she presents herself as a voice of reason, a symbol of stability and hope. Second, she positions herself as someone above partisan politics. Her speech wasn't about policy or party agendas. It was about emotions, unity, and bringing people together. This is a classic political strategy, laying the groundwork for a campaign without officially announcing one. And third, she lets the speculation build on its own. She doesn't need to say she's running. She only has to allow the media, donors, and strategists to imagine what a Michelle Obama campaign would look like, and they are already doing just that. For months, reports have suggested that top Democratic donors and insiders have been quietly discussing the possibility of her running. Some believe she would be the party's strongest candidate for 2028, while others speculate that if Kamala Harris struggles, Michelle Obama could even be positioned as a last-minute replacement. Of course, for now, this is just speculation. But the bigger question remains, do Americans really want more of the same policies that have led to this moment? As much as the Obamas try to separate themselves from the challenges of the past 4 years, their influence never truly disappeared. The rise in crime across major cities, the economic struggles of the middle class, the growing divisions in the country.
You see how
These issues didn't start with Joe Biden. They have been building for over a decade. Outro. What do you think about Megyn Kelly's shocking reaction to Michelle Obama on live TV? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.